Welcome everyone to the COP26 Resilience Hub Energy Access and Resilience Panel, Growing Energy Security and Sustainable Energy Solutions in the Lower Mekong region. I would like to note that translation is available in Lao, Thai, Khmer, and Burmese by pressing on the globe icon on the bottom of your screen. Today, our panel will examine how inclusive and innovative energy solutions promote the adaptive capacity of the Lower Mekong region in the face of increased climate vulnerabilities. Experts from different sectors will explore key questions on emerging technologies, policy, data-driven decision-making, and social inclusion and energy access. We will additionally have the opportunity to hear an exciting announcement from the Corporate Clean Energy Alliance. We will have a dedicated Q&A at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to add your questions in the chat box as we will be monitoring it as well. My name is Elizabeth Tipwong. I'm the Civil Society Specialist with the Mekong for the Future project with WWF-Greater Mekong, and I'm pleased to now invite Dr. Steve Olive, Mission Director of the USAID-Regional Development Mission for Asia, to say a few opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And thank you for everyone for organizing this important panel. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to the event of Growing Energy Security and Sustainable Energy Solutions in the Lower Mekong. Thank you to COP26 Presidency, the United Nations FCCC, the Global Resilience Partnership, the Asian Development Bank, the World Wildlife Fund for hosting today's event. My name is Steve Olive, and I'm the Mission Director for the United States Agency for International Development's Regional Development Mission for Asia, based in Bangkok, Thailand. The United States government is prioritizing the climate crisis as a core element of our foreign policy agenda. President Biden launched a whole-of-government effort to achieve net zero emissions economy-wide by no later than 2050. As part of the administration's priorities, USAID is in the process of finalizing its climate change strategy, and it's now open for public comment. And I encourage all of you to go and look at the strategy and provide any comments. And you can find that at www.usaid.gov/climate/strategy. We would very much welcome all of your comments. The energy sector represents the largest producer of total global CO2 emissions. The ways we produce, distribute, and use energy resources represents a critical frontier for climate change mitigation efforts on our planet. Lower Mekong nations are adapting to the environmental threats posed by climate change and are increasingly finding ways to chart low carbon development pathways and clean energy solutions. USAID works with governments, the private sector, and civil society to identify ways to expand energy access for everyone. To date, USAID and its partners have mobilized more than $8.6 billion for clean energy development, supporting the installation of nearly 10 gigawatts of renewable energy generation capacity in Southeast Asia, and helping to avoid greenhouse gas emissions of more than 90 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. That's equivalent to more than 19.5 million cars driven for 1 year. We are committed to continuing this work with you, but there is more to be done to ensure that the Lower Mekong is better prepared to face climate vulnerabilities. Today's practitioners from the various intersections of the energy sector will share their experience on how to apply energy solutions to accelerate equitable, resilient, and ambitious climate actions. I'm also excited to preview for you the newly established Corporate Clean Energy Alliance, which we will elaborate on during this soft launch. The diverse perspectives of all stakeholders involved in this initiative reflect the goals of COP26 Summit, which is to bring parties together to accelerate climate action. Working together, I'm confident we can accelerate an energy transition in the region that is cleaner, smarter, and more secure for future generations. Thank you all very much for your participation, We welcome your questions and your ideas to this session, and I wish you all continued success in all of your endeavors. Back to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Dr. Olive. And I would like to now introduce our panel briefly before we go into our first series of questions. So joining us today on this panel, we'll have Kunyok Tanawat Kirapat from Mekong Safeguards Project. We have Mr. Nathan Lee of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Representing the Mekong Regional Gender and Development Specialist, we have Manivan Suyavong. And finally, representing the WWF Mekong for the Future project, we have Viroet Tianchianan. So now I would like to go to our first question. Each panelist will have a specific question directed towards them, and then we'll open it up to the other panelists to respond before we go to the Q&A. So for our first question is directed to Mekong Safeguards, Kunyok. So can you please further elaborate on how energy security relates to the adaptive capacity of communities in the Lower Mekong region?
Thanks, Elizabeth. It's a great question. Traditionally, we are used to defining energy security as availability of energy in sufficient quantity at affordable prices with environmental and climate protection consideration. However, the term energy security remains rather imprecise and subject to interpretations, particularly when considering different perceptions, scale, level of economic development, and others. New innovations such as disruptive technologies and recent energy transitions trends toward decarbonization, digitalizations, and decentralizations are reshaping the concept of energy security as well. Also, in some contexts, energy security can be referred to as energy self-sufficiency. Regardless, energy security, according to Asia Pacific Energy Research Center, revolves around 4 A's, which is availability, affordability, accessibility, and acceptability. We are concerning on the climate change as we speak in this COP26. Consideration on that objective is part of the acceptability section. Now that we have broadly defined energy security, what is adaptive capacity of communities? It's the ability of the community to adjust and manage risks from climate change, including climate variability and extremes. Some notable disasters in the Lower Mekong include tsunami in 2004, Cyclone Nargis in 2008, flooding in Thailand in 2011, and more recent dam collapse in Lao PDR in 2018. So these climate change related disasters resulted in considerable personal and economic losses. Adaptive capacity can help manage climate risks and lessen the impact of these events should they occur. So how is energy security related to adaptive capacity of communities? Basically, the answer is through resilience. Resilience is the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and adapt to changing conditions and respond to, and recover from diverse disruptions. Adaptive capacity is a key factor in community resilience for climate change, and this is directly related to energy security in terms of how the associated risks in the energy sector are managed. Let me give you an example. Lower Mekong region is susceptible to various climate vulnerabilities, such as extreme precipitation, which can lead to flooding and landslide, causing disruption to power generations and transmission, thus impacting the energy security. In order to address this issue, we can integrate resilience in energy planning. Community can address and mitigate impacts from natural and human risks. An example for this is improving technical readiness of the energy infrastructure system that are more robust, adaptable, and flexible, which is done through proper risk assessment, planning, and community engagement. Having this resilient plan would enhance the adaptive capacity of that community. So at the end, improved adaptive capacity of communities would lead to better energy security. On the other hand, energy security also enables better adaptive capacity as well, since community have access to energy resources. Thank you, Elizabeth. Up to you.
Thank you, Kunyok. That was a brilliantly laid out response. And I think that really sets a wonderful tone for the rest of the panel. And I would now like to open it up actually to the other panelists if you have any questions or responses to Kunyok, or if you would like to add anything on to his response in reference to the question. So Nathan, Virawet, or Manivon, is there anything that you would like to contribute to this answer or to refer to the panelists? And if not, oh, sorry, Nathan, sorry, were you going to speak? Okay. If not, then we can move on to the next question, actually, which is to you. So I would like to now invite Mr. Nathan Lee for his question, which is how can transboundary or regional energy planning support sustainable and secure energy needs as we move towards collective climate goals, as well as our individual NDCs? So Nathan, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and hello to everyone. As you noted, I'm Nathan Lee with the U.S. Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and also the technical lead for our Advanced Energy Partnership for Asia, a program funded by USAID that provides assistance in Southeast Asia and the Lower Mekong, of course, to help accelerate clean energy transitions. This is a really relevant question for Southeast Asian countries involved currently in the ASEAN Interconnection Master Plan Study, or ASEAN 3. For those that are not familiar, AIMS 3 is led by the ASEAN Center for Energy, the heads of ASEAN Power Authorities, or HAPAA, and USAID. And it's intended to really identify the infrastructure needs for expanded power trade and higher shares of renewable energy in the region. AIMS 3 is a great example of this transboundary cooperation to further shared energy and climate goals. But it's not the only example. These activities really offer many benefits that support collective, clean, secure, and resilient energy objectives. The first benefit is reaching ambitious renewable energy targets. The renewable energy resources that a country has available to it really depend on many factors. And sadly, these are not evenly distributed across the globe, as we know. For this reason, not all countries have the abundant mix of clean energy resources that may enable an affordable transition to a high renewable energy power system. This is where transboundary energy planning can really provide a solution. Countries can develop a power trade system or systems that allow access to a larger pool of clean energy resources to support NDC and global climatic goals, or global climate goals. The second benefit is the enhancement of energy security and resilience. Because regional power systems offer countries the ability to pool a more diverse set of clean energy resources, this allows for reduced reliance on fossil fuels and imports for power generation. Interconnections with neighbors also offer supplemental options for power during extreme periods of the year, such as a dry season when dominant hydropower resources may fall short, or when significant assets in generation and transmission could be disrupted. Further diversifying a country's energy mix through trade creates a more resilient system, as there are more options in the event of emergencies. Diversity here really means spatial location of assets, generation assets, or even the reliance on water resources. Diverse generation portfolios that reduce dependence on hydropower, importantly for the Lower Mekong, also support resilience through decreasing vulnerability to climatic changes that may come with precipitation changes. Next, regional cooperation can promote more cost and resource efficient integration of variable renewables through the sharing and coordinating of resources and operating reserves. System operators generally maintain the balance of supply and demand on the system by committing or starting generation in advance of when it's needed, and then dispatching power in combinations that minimize operating costs and maintain reliability. To do this, each system operator really needs to have adequate generation reserves to address variability and uncertainty. But when we increase the share of renewables, we add more complex challenges to this, and balancing supply and demand becomes more complex. Pooling this variability and uncertainty over larger geographic region generally reduces net variability, reducing the operating reserve requirements, and reduces overgeneration and curtailment, ultimately reducing overall cost of generation. Finally, regional planning and interconnection strategies can also attract private sector investment in clean energy. As regional planning, cooperation, market development, and transparent strategies form, private sector investors will be attracted to opportunities that pose less risk, as there's potentially a larger demand pool for the sale of power and a reduced risk for a poor return on investment. Additionally, transmission and market systems may also attract new private sector actors. All of this drives competition and decreases energy system costs. Of course, all of this brings new technical, financial, social, institutional, and political challenges. That means we need new agreements, regulatory frameworks, and this all may be needed to really enable power connections and trade, hinting at the need for a really inclusive planning process that bring countries together with a shared understanding of the objectives and benefits that transboundary energy system planning can offer. So thank you, Elizabeth and everyone, and I look forward to the ideas of the broader panel on this question.
Thank you so much, Nathan. And I will open it up to the other panelists if they have anything that they want to add on or to ask you. And I also actually have a question for you as well myself, but I will open it up to the other panelists first. So Kunvira, Kunyok, and Manivan, can I give the floor over to you if you have anything you want to address to Mr. Nathan?
Sure, I have a question. So, hey, Nathan, been a while since we join hands. One of the question I have, maybe is interesting to the audience, is what are some of the current biggest challenges that you see in realizing this regional interconnectivity, and how do you think we can overcome them?
Great. This is a very large question for the amount of time we have, but I think one large concern, I think, is the investment in the infrastructure needs. As you know, every country has their own priorities internally, and how to balance those investment priorities internally for their own domestic needs with more regional planning needs, and make that justification for investments that may not be immediately clear on how they benefit the domestic needs for power. So I think that's one of the major needs there, and it's a large investment, right? Lots of transmission potentially, market systems, to be able to coordinate and trade power over regions. But in terms of planning, I think just bringing parties together at this level and starting that inclusive planning process is one way to start to overcome that and understand the needs and the benefits that this can offer. Thanks for that question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. And I think actually maybe building on that, I think drawing it to the current situation that we find ourselves in and have for an exacerbated now period of time, given the COVID-19 pandemic with the closure of physical borders, where do you see a system like this where you're saying we have these pooled resources, we have these shared interests in a transboundary perspective that maybe don't rely necessarily on a physicality? Do you see that a model like this has actually shown itself to be as a value in the framework that we're in, or do you see it as potentially as having met with challenges?
Of course, I hope that COVID and this pandemic doesn't last forever. So hopefully we are on the mend of this. I know every country is dealing, and region is dealing differently. But I think it does pose challenges to bringing people together, shaking hands, building agreements and consensus on the planning needs. Of course, that's a challenge. It's a challenge for everything right now. That's why we're all virtual for COP and these activities. But I believe that maybe not in relation to COVID, but in relation to a lot of our energy security and resilience needs, we can look at many different regional interconnection activities, including in the Lower Mekong. For example, the Greater Mekong system interconnection projects, interconnections with Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, as pilots showing the benefits of these broader interconnection activities and planning and pooling of resources. And we can also look broader to Europe or the US, where this has been quite successful for many years of pooling these resources to support energy security and resilience across these regions.
Thank you so much for that. I think that certainly the pandemic has underscored the need for adaptive capacity, certainly, like you said, globally in the region, of course. So that's, I think that this also just adds an extra component and a lens to the questions that we're addressing today. We have 1 more minute, actually, if any of the other panelists would like to add on or direct a question, and if not, we can move on to the next question. So Virwet or Manivan, do you have any questions you'd like to direct towards Nathan?
Yeah, maybe for Nathan, if you would be able to share your thoughts on the technology development in the renewable energies and how this actually maybe multiplied the effort in terms of how we'll be able to do better.
Nathan, were you able to get that, or Virwet, would you be able to repeat yourself?
Okay.
A little louder,
Yeah.
please.
Okay. No, I was asking, I mean, in terms of the technology development in renewable energies that we have seen quite rapidly growing in the past couple of years, how would that help in terms of the effort that we're trying to work together?
Yeah, and I think in terms of renewable energy technologies, maybe you're referring to solar. You know, of course, we're seeing costs for solar coming down. We're seeing more deployment of solar and really low, reverse auction prices across Southeast Asia and across the globe. We're also seeing more interest in deployed wind and even offshore wind in some countries in Southeast Asia, and potential lowering costs in that. We're also seeing cost and implementation of storage technologies, which help us to store some of that energy from the times when it is available, these intermittent resources into those kind of off hours, and all of that pools together to really help us harness all of the resources that are quite diverse across a region like Southeast Asia. So I think dropping in costs, new technologies, and just deployment and capacity building in the region all supports this. And of course, the interconnection piece also includes transmission, but I think just understanding how we can build these transmission systems and market systems will also enhance regional cooperation as well. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you so much to you both. And now I would like to move over to our next question, which is to Manivan. So can you please explain why energy access is a gendered issue, especially in the context of climate resiliency? And how can practitioners and policymakers integrate gender equality and social inclusion into energy planning and policy? Oh, Sis, you're on mute. We still can't hear you. I don't know if you need to adjust your microphone. Why don't we move to Virwet's question? And if you want to try and adjust your microphone, and then we'll come back to you after Virwet. So Virwet, if you're prepared, sorry to put you on the spot. But if I can now move over to your question. So clean energy solutions should prioritize the decarbonization of power systems, but also the empowerment of key stakeholders, including local communities. So based on your experience, what are the effective approaches to bring diverse stakeholders together to identify key priorities, actions, and foster collaboration to promote and support just and inclusive energy access in the region?
Thank you for the questions. That's actually what the project that I'm leading at the Chief of Party of this USAID-Regional for the Future is for. We aim to strengthen civil society in this natural resource governance. And by doing so, I think that's actually made me think of what Director Steve mentioned in the opening remark. And also what I have heard from USAID and Mr. Samantha Powell said last night, that localizations is to bring together the local communities and local knowledge and expertise to get together to tackle this global challenge of the energy security and how we can make it sustainable. Because if you look at the situations in terms of the energy and decision-making power, you can see is that Yeah, we can see that this is a lot of the vertical alliance in the sense that the decision-making power is on the top. But what we should be looking at is more of the horizontal alliance in which we work together, the decision maker, the state, the private sectors, and also the local communities, because that is the way that we will be able to bring in voices of the local communities, indigenous people, and those who are actually living with the nature where most of the natural resources have been withdrawn from. And who would know better than those local communities than themselves, because they know what happened in their own backyard, what happened in their own river, the fish, the forest, the wildlife. And those natural beings cannot speak for themselves, but the local community can represent them. And if we would be able to create those equitable chance for them to participate meaningfully in the decision-making process, we would be able to enable better decision-making so that we can raise the voice of those who have been unheard in this whole process. And as such, we would be able to bring in this diverse point of view. And there's no one size fits all. In different contexts, the situation may be different, but the important is how we will be able to bring in this local knowledge, local wisdom, and their voice into the decision-making process. In order to do so, what we have seen in the region is that they need to have better access to data, better transparencies, so that the local communities and the civil society will have better information, better informed. And if there's a need for capacity development, engagement, coordinations, then the international community can play a role here. I think this is where the USAID and the WWF come in to support, to strengthen civil society, to better engage in the decision making. And as such, we will be able to see that the effort to make this energy security, how we can secure the insecure. If people are insecure from the very beginning, it would not make sense to have that secure policy later on. And if you want to sustain the sustainable development, it is important that we engage the local communities and also the civil society in this effort. And at the end, I'd just like to say that if the decision making want to go fast, they usually go alone. But if we want to go far, then go together, and I believe that together is possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kunveruit. That's a really wonderful note to end on. And we have time for 1 minute of feedback from our other panelists. So sorry, I appreciate that we lost a little time there. But if any of the other panelists have any questions or statements to add on to this, I welcome you to do so. You've left them speechless. And with that, we're back from Sis Manivan, and her microphone is back in good standing. So I would like to now bring it back to Manivan to conclude our panel. And just a quick reminder on the question, it's can you please explain why energy access is a gendered issue, especially in the context of climate resiliency, and how can practitioners and policymakers integrate gender equality and social inclusion into the energy planning and policy development? So, Manivan?
Yes, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me today. Can you hear me well? I would like to the Sustainable Development Goal 7 is ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So during the VNR number 2, the government also review that 93% coverage of electricity in Laos covered already, and however the urban and rural area have different accessible for the energy, and also a number of households across the country still use firewood for cooking, and because of women and men have different needs based on the different role. So access to the energy, they also different. And practitioners like INGO development groups, private sector should work with community to understand the specific need and impact of energy developments, tools and framework we have to apply. For example, gender analysis in the project designs, in the project implementation, and also evaluation of the projects. Because very important that if the women and men in the community, they access to the energy together, they will improve their livelihood and make them no one left behind. So if energy disrupt due to the climate shocks, as we mentioned already about the speaker talk about the disaster happen, lead to the increase incident of gender-based violence and also discrimination of the marginalized groups, such as people with disability, elderly, youth, ethnic minority. They will have a big impact to them. So in the remote communities, energy resources, such as we have the non-timber forest products, wood for cooking and heating. This is usually the women and girls work and to support the family food security. So if they have the impact, they not access to these resources or have the disaster, they will have far away and walk away to find more the resources for support their family. And also having sustainable access to the energy improve the community resilience, as we also mentioned, to the climate change. So it is very important to give the opportunity to them to have the ability to adapt to extreme weather that impact livelihood and also safety. So this is how the practitioners and decision making to integrate gender equality and social inclusion into energy plannings. Very important that to understand the step of the gender impact assessment, like the for the planning, sex, gender disaggregated data, it should be collected from the beginning in the project, and understanding the context of the community to better plannings, and also the identify the issue in the committee level, and women interest. So very important that we will plan for the project that support the energy project. And also it's about very important about the gender action plan in the projects. So developer or the development workers have to understand how we can have the gender action plans. And the last one is should have the monitoring audit, review about the gender mainstreaming in the project. So it's we as a civil society, we work with the community level. We would like to have the cooperate with the stakeholder in the this energy framework to support how to give opportunity to the development group in the society to participate benefit from the project.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And we're actually just at time right now, so that's perfect. Yeah. And I just want to thank you so much for your remarks. And I think that's a great note to wrap up the panel on. So thank you so much for your insights. And I would invite our other panelists now, if they have any questions for you, or if they have any statements that they would like to add on to that, you have 2 minutes.
Elizabeth, I might add just a comment here. I think bringing it from the community project level, maybe up to policy and planning level, just noting that making space in the policy and planning activities for men and women, which historically may not have been space for everyone to be included, and ensuring that this is really explicit in the plans and policies at the national or broader level is I think really we found very important and helpful to support gender equity and social inclusion in broader energy planning and policies, and also ensuring that there's more diverse mix of stakeholders engaged in all of our activities that include capacity building, et cetera, but also making space for the marginalized groups that maybe we don't typically think of when we're doing energy planning or policy development, and making sure that they're not left out as they typically may have been in the past. So ensuring that those things happen even at the larger policy level and planning activity, and just making that explicit has been helpful in our activities. Thanks.
Great, thank you for that. And I think that that speaks really well to the points that were brought up earlier, not just in like what Quinn Virwit was saying about how and the value in bringing together these diverse stakeholders and how different projects are looking to achieve that. But then now you're saying that there's actual results that come from this and that why this is so critical. And then as we've heard from Kunyok and Oimanivan, that from the community level, and then when we're looking at the different groups that are often excluded, why this is so critical, because not everyone is facing energy barriers and not everyone is facing their adaptive capacity through the same lens and through the same restrictions. So I just really want to thank everyone so much for your contributions. We have a question now actually for the entire panel before we move on to our CCEA announcement. So I would invite all the panelists to consider the following question. What are some technology innovations specific to this region that can support vulnerable communities in their climate resiliency? So how can we as practitioners ensure that these technologies are equitable and accessible? So I think this actually speaks to what all of you in different contexts have pointed to. So would anyone like to start us off? We have 2 minutes.
I'm happy to maybe start us off. I don't want to control the answers here, but one example of a technology that or an application that NREL and USAID have worked on in Southeast Asia is the Renewable Energy Data Explorer, which provides renewable energy resource data, high quality, high resolution renewable energy resource data at no cost to anybody who wants to access it. It's completely open and publicly available, as well as complementary data sets that do help with energy system planning, spatial data sets that help with energy system planning, resilience planning, energy security concerns, and makes this something that's not unaffordable to some of these communities or even smaller actors that may not typically have access to this type of information and data, which really kind of helps to drive these smart decisions that can support equitable and accessible energy resources in the region. So one example there.
That's great. Thank you so much. Do we have anything from anyone else in the group?
Well, I can add on just a few more. Nathan's already covered a lot. So one additional item is in a more, secluded areas where there's fewer populations. When we're dealing with energy access, the off-grid kind of renewable energy can also be very, useful and valuable to those who are far from connectivity to the transmission lines. So they have their own ability to produce energy within their environment. So that's another technology that can also help help increase energy access to a more far remote areas. Yeah. Thank you.
That's great. Virwit?
Just want to have a quick add to what you just mentioned. I think democratization of energy will be important for the expansion and development of energy security and sustainability in the Lower Mekong regions. If we would be able to democratize decision-making process, making sure that all those technologies are available and also accessible to all people and the local communities, and the way in which they will be able to make decisions on how to use those technologies to enable them to have access to secure energy in a sustainable way. I think that would be the key to success.
Great. And Marivan, I will give you the opportunity if you just want to say one last comment on this before we move on. Okay, well, thank you so much to all of our panelists. We will come back to you for the open Q&A session, but first I would actually like to hand it back over to Dr. Steve Olive for our announcement.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you for all of the panelists. Really appreciate the information that you've shared and the ideas that you've stimulated. That was really an excellent panel. Thank you very much. As part of this event, and in the spirit of partnerships that can make net zero emissions a reality, it is my pleasure to formally announce the Corporate Clean Energy Alliance, or CCEA. In line with the U.S. Agency's International Development's Regional Development Mission for Asia's 5-year Regional Development Cooperation Strategy, USAID is committed to work closely with companies and corporate alliances across the region, such as the CCEA, to promote industry-level responsible and inclusive business practices in achieving regional priorities. The Corporate Clean Energy Alliance is a coalition of business leaders and associations committed to working with USAID, host country governments, and like-minded partners to facilitate the rapid deployment of low carbon solutions that fight climate change and support the increased use of clean energy. USAID's climate strategy, with its focus on mitigation and adaptation, clean energy, and sustainable landscapes, will drive our future work with the public and private sectors in order to advance the administration's climate change goals. And I've added the link to this draft strategy, which is now open to public comment. And also you'll see the link that Nathan added as well on our Renewable Data Explorer that he mentioned earlier in his remarks. So please see that in the chat. Many of the biggest companies on the planet have come to understand that the climate crisis will impact their employees' lives and families in addition to their bottom line. The Corporate Clean Energy Alliance is a growing network of companies and organizations operating in Southeast Asia. Together with manufacturing and supply chain partners, CCEA members currently purchase more than 9 million megawatt hours of electricity annually and directly and indirectly employ nearly 900,000 people across Southeast Asia. We look forward to seeing these numbers increase as more companies join the CCEA. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome 2 charter partners of the CCEA, Nike and Ansell. I want to thank Adidas, Ansell, Fluence Energy, First Solar, New Balance, Nike, NSG, and Wärtsilä for their leadership and commitment to this cause of supporting innovative approaches that achieve our shared climate and energy objectives. For other companies interested in partnering with us on this initiative, please contact USAID's Asia Edge Hub to find out more, and we'll put that address in the chat as well. I would now like to turn to our partners for a few words from the private sector perspective. First is Maureen Graham of Nike, and then Arta Salgado from Ansell. Maureen, over to you.
Thank you, Steve, and hello, everyone. I'm Maureen Graham. I lead responsible sourcing and manufacturing for Nike. First off, I just want to say thank you to USAID for what's been an incredible partnership over many years and for spearheading the Corporate Clean Energy Alliance. We're really excited to continue working together to accelerate this energy transition across Southeast Asia. For decades now, Nike's been on a journey to protect the future for sport. And we know that we can't do this alone. The science is very clear. we'll all need to do our part to protect the future of the planet. And in our experience, the best way to drive that type of progress and change is through collective action and engaging really closely with our suppliers, governments, NGOs, and other stakeholders. When you think about the scale of the manufacturers who make Nike products, it's quite significant. Many of them are publicly traded. They're all large businesses in their own right. And Nike is just one piece of their total portfolio. So we want each of these suppliers to take a leadership role in sustainability and work with us to lower all of our impact on the planet. For example, since 2008, we've worked with our suppliers to reduce energy in our footwear production by 65% through initiatives like eliminating steam boilers and continuing to look for lower carbon thermal emissions, solutions. The science also shows that we need to do more to combat climate change. And that's where an alliance like the one that's being announced today can make a really big difference across Southeast Asia. Over 2/3 of our manufacturing emissions come from electricity procurement. So a big unlock in us meeting our carbon targets is decarbonizing the electricity that our suppliers use. The only way that we can do that is by procuring reliable, cost-competitive, clean energy options for our suppliers. And we know that replacing the majority of our collective electrical consumption in Southeast Asia with renewable green electricity will require a team effort. For example, USAID's partnership and leadership with the Low Emission Energy Program in Vietnam has been tremendous, helping to develop a pilot program with the Vietnamese government for direct power purchasing of renewable energy. We know that the future of sport depends on a healthy planet, and we're very hopeful that working together with the Corporate Clean Energy Alliance, we can accelerate an energy transition in these regions that is cleaner, smarter, and more secure for future generations. Thank you for having us, and thank you everyone today.
And I'll take over from Maureen. Maureen, thank you, Maureen. So Ansell was established 125 years ago, and we are headquartered in Australia. We are a global leader in providing protection solutions, focusing on industrial, surgical, life science gloves, and body protection suits and devices. Globally, we have about 14 manufacturing sites spread out across 10 countries, and we have a sales presence in over 100+ geographies. By setting ourselves very ambitious climate goals, we want to break new grounds in our industry. And with increased focus on sustainability, smarter products, and more connected PPE, we strive to ensure that the safety of workers and the environment we live in is ensured. As Maureen said, even for us, energy is a key driver for our emissions related impacts of our operations, and therefore a major focus area for us. Whilst our renewable energy ambitions are supported by market-based access in a few of our facilities in Europe, Ansell's global operations electrical footprint, over 95% lies in Asia, and with 66% of that lying in Southeast Asia. Even if we look at increasing our rooftop solar installations by 9 times, essentially, we would only be able to address about 10% of that footprint. In most countries where we operate, limited market policies and access to off-site clean energy are a challenge to overcome as we aim to achieve our 100% renewable energy goals. The contribution of energy in product carbon footprints has an impact in the value chain inventories of customers and end users, and thereby have much further reaching impacts than the country of origin as well. These challenges and others would mean that access to clean energy will become a major factor for corporate investments. Essentially, if we will be making decisions on expansions and investments based on whether the market access is available for clean energy. And this is a challenge which is faced by organizations with the short term, that is out 2030 decarbonization targets. This is why Ansell came on board as a charter partner for the Corporate Clean Energy Alliance to lend our voice and to support to influence and drive policy change in the region. As everyone has said today, collaboration will continue to be a key to overcome these challenges, and benefits of access to clean energy and low-cost energy will transcend just meeting corporate objectives and targets, but will also contribute towards national NDC, the achievement of NDCs and national sustainable economic growth in these countries and regions as well. We will continue to engage with the CCEA and other charter partners for an inspired future powered by clean energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen and Arto, for taking the time to join our event today and for speaking. I know that private sector engagement is top of many people's minds at this year's COP specifically. And so being able to link that to the other themes that were addressed today, I think is so critical. And so again, I would like to thank you very much for your time. And as Mark has pointed out in the chat, if there are any questions specific to the CCEA, there's an email address wherein you can address those. So again, I want to thank you so much for your time. And now I would be very pleased to open it up to Q&A from the audience. So if we could bring the panelists back to the screen. And I do know that we actually already have one question waiting for us in the chat box. And it's a great one to kick us off. So actually, Kunjong, could I ask you to please read that out to our panelists?
Sure, Elizabeth. So this question might be quite relevant to what we already discussed earlier. So this is from Kun Sirilak from UN Women. Could the panelists share what are some successful strategies for engaging women and marginalized communities in energy adaptation policy that ensures the women equality benefit from the policy as much as men?
So this has definitely been a hot topic that's come through here. And I think that we've talked around this a lot, but let's talk about some direct strategies. So maybe, Marivan, can I ask you to start us off maybe, because this is very relevant to the topic which you brought forward, and then I'll open it up to the other panelists.
Thank you. It's very good hard question also. Thank you for UN Women to ask about the question. We observe that from experience in the level that we engage women and marginalized community in project developments, it should be have the step that gender impact assessment in the process of the develop the project or frameworks. Like I already mentioned about the step that we should have the gender disaggregation data in the baseline. So the step about the preparation of the project. And also after that, about the understanding of the context of the community that they live on. So we should have the women participation in the consultation for the understanding of the context in the community level, and also identify the issue in the community and understand what the women need, and to put in the project log frames. And we should have the gender action plan. So to put in the project strategy, how we can have the women and men specific need addresses in the planning for the policy. So I think it's a gender impact assessment should be done before the project and the implementation, and also put in the policy of the organization or development project.
Thank
you.
I give
another speaker to answer. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think that also articulates that I'm just thinking about even the UNFCCC Gender Action Plan. This was a long debated plan. So I think that this shows that you talk about from the community or the practitioner level, and then also we have this extremely high level policy making as well, where we show that gender needs to be considered quite thoughtfully and thoroughly. So it needs to be integrated at all levels, not just a one-stop shop. as we would say. Can I invite any of the other panelists if you would like to add on or address the question?
Maybe I'd like to add on this topic that I think this is very important that we need to talk about women empowerment in the whole process, in the holistic approach. Because if we are working on these issues, which is being led by men or being dominated by men, we would not be able to benefit from having the voice of women in this whole process. And it's not just the equal access or equal participation that we are talking about it being equitable, which means that there need to be support to the women to have the better chance, better participations, better information, knowledge, and also decision-making power. That is not only in the decision-making process, but also the society as a whole to support this whole movement. And as such, you could see that there's a need for all of us, the private sectors, the international communities, the civil societies, the government, to work together to ensure that we have equal representation of women in the whole process and having all the necessary support so that the women will be able to make meaningful participations. And something like I think UN Women did in the past, the he for she initiative. I think that's also very important to make sure that women will feel more comfortable and more secure. And I think as maybe what President Roosevelt said, freedom from fear. If we can make sure that the women are free from fear of being missing out in this whole process, and also for us to make sure that we are not missing out on hearing the women's voice and having women equally participate in the whole process, I think that will benefit us all and that we are all equal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Veerowit. Would any of the other panelists like to add on or address the question?
Just additional items. The Mekong Safeguard actually has conducted a GESI analysis. So I'm going to actually be sharing that in the chat box for Kun Sirilak as well. So that might be useful. So our approach is more of a, first we have 3 steps. One is to do no harm. Basically, develop planners and design in a way that there's not going to be any harmful implications to any of this, vulnerable groups and genders. And then the second part is we need to, incorporate just these specific elements into infrastructure planning needs, particularly for anything that's related to resettlement, livelihood restorations, and we need to get, more participation from women in the consultation meetings. And at a more strategic level, at the 3rd level, which is, to do a legal and policy reform in institutional capacity, to integrate a more just approach in the infrastructure, for example, like, create a mechanism for dual title deeds, just, including targets and quotas for women in technical and non-technical trainings and employment. Those are the things that we have, put address, and all of those are in the report that I'm going to be sharing within the chat box. So thank you.
That's great, thank you. And yes, please, I encourage anyone, not just our panelists, but if anyone has anything that they would like to share, any resources, please share those in the chat box. Those are great. And Nathan, actually, we're almost at the end of our time. So if there's anything that you would like to add on to cap us off, I welcome you to do so.
Sure, I think I'll just lay out a few principles that I think that we've identified just to support these sorts of activities in program design delivery. And of course, a lot of these have been covered. I think I've talked about a few of them earlier about, making space for everybody in our projects. But I would just add on, making sure that we're proactively structuring diverse country stakeholder groups in our projects in agreement with, the context of where we're working. But also seeking diverse project teams on the implementer side, making sure that we have the technical expertise, but also other value adds that I think everybody here is hinting at that, cultural perspectives, gender perspectives, language skills, all of these things are value adds beyond technical skills, so that those are being kind of included in our projects. Making sure that we're kind of cognizant of what the concerns are in our partner countries or where we're working, and making sure that we're respectful of those. Integrating a lot of these considerations into project objectives, making them really explicit and clear when we're doing projects, as opposed to, just having a sign-up sheet that maybe has us track the gender of participants. Let's make sure that we're clear about the objectives of our project and what we need. And then also just integrating this into the technical approaches we're using. I think Dhanawat just noted on this, like making sure that we're including those considerations in how we do our projects. And then also just sharing experience and learning with others. This is not a technical area or an area that many of us have studied. So asking these questions and just sharing best practices and learning so that we can improve this in the future for the energy sector. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. And we're just at time right now. So I just really quickly would like to thank so much our organizers, our panelists, and of course our interpreters, so making sure that we could reach a broader audience. So thank you again, everyone, for your time. And I invite you to join the rest of the Resiliency Hub events for the day. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful Friday.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Saudi.
Mhm.
Thank you. Goodbye.